Welcome to the Texas CASA Fierce Advocate Series. The purpose of this series is to provide a concise, quick resource tool for you to use that will allow you to find the information that you need on a given subject to be able to effectively advocate and be that superhero for a child. The CASA way, what does that mean? The CASA way is uncompromising belief that what others think is impossible, we can achieve, and that we're all part of the solution. So fierce advocacy, the CASA way, means you will talk to and work with all of the stakeholders to make that qualitative difference in the life of this child, because you know that you are part of the solution. You, CASA volunteer, are the fierce advocate.
It's important for CASA volunteers to understand that they have to be fierce advocates even in the court setting. Sometimes it can be intimidating to stand between attorneys and other professionals, but it's extremely critical for CASA volunteers to understand what their role is and be bold enough to say what it is that they need to say.
We at Texas CASA are proud to bring you the Fierce Advocate series. Each toolkit in this series contains a video overview of the subject to help you get started quickly and easily. The accompanying manual has much more in-depth information, including tips, action items, checklists, and more. Every toolkit follows the same format and includes several icons to help you stay organized and make sense of complicated information. The law icon alerts you to any laws or regulations that may apply to the topic at hand. The Tools icon indicates strategies, checklists, and more that make being an advocate easier. The Tips icon indicates things to remember and ways to simplify complex issues. What would a fierce advocate do? This icon speaks for itself. This video and the accompanying manual can be found on the Texas CASA website.
Well, if you think about a child's two constants in their lives, typically it's going to be their home environment and their school environment. That really is what connects them to their communities. Children in foster care have to be removed from their home. That leaves their school environment as really their only constant and connection to their community and to other people. If you look at the statistics that surround children in foster care with regards to their educational outcomes, they're pretty daunting to look at. We know that if a child remains in foster care until they turn 18 years old, they're probably going to have made at least 8 school changes. Kids in foster care are 3 times as likely to be identified with special education needs, and also 3 times more likely to be disciplined for their behavior at school. We also know that if a child remains in foster care until they turn 18 years old, there's really only about a 50% chance that they're even going to graduate from high school. Only about 2% of children who age out of care in foster care are ever going to achieve a bachelor's degree. There's so many benefits and so many important and critical choices and decisions that need to be made. It's very important for our CASA volunteers to know what the law says, know what the benefits are, so that they can discuss those issues with their children and be able to advocate for them at the school and also in the courts. So because of the trauma that they're experiencing from being removed, as well as the reasons that they were removed, their trauma at school is going to be really magnified. It's really important for us to do everything we possibly can to help stabilize and sustain those educational settings and educational connections that they have.
I developed a lot of emotional issues, so I ended up in the juvenile justice system at 14 years old. That's when the real issues at school began. I really didn't have much of an education past that point. My schoolwork stopped then. I basically was doing 3rd and 4th grade work when I should have been at grade level. And I did that kind of work up until I aged out of care, so I didn't advance academically. I have dreams of completing a degree. Do I believe it's possible? Not so much.
So what we would want to see in a CASA report is really not necessarily how they're doing in school and what their grades are, but to dig deeper. That's what we would expect the CASA volunteer to do. I think CASA volunteers would be surprised to know how important their reports are to courts, especially with regards to our well-being outcomes. The judge wants the CASA volunteer to tell the judge that day what the judge can do, either by a suggestion or by court order, to benefit the child that day.
Once temporary or permanent managing conservatorship is awarded to the Department of Family and Protective Services, the department is legally responsible for all decisions related to the child, including where the child will attend school. The department chooses an education decision maker for the day-to-day needs of the child. Usually, this is the child's caregiver. Children in special education are assigned a surrogate parent who can often be the CASA volunteer. The state of Texas includes 1,200 independent school districts, operating more than 8,000 public and charter schools. Since every school in Texas is different, as a fierce advocate, it's best for you to learn the policies and practices of the specific school you're working with. If the child has to move to another school, you as a CASA volunteer are uniquely qualified to know the child's academic calendar. This may include scheduled holidays, upcoming tests, or a play or sports event. As a fierce advocate, it's critical that you help manage these details to reduce the trauma of this type of transition. You may be the only constant in the child's life.
I did have a great support system, and I had one person that was a wonderful advocate for me, and that person, I truly believe, kept me from successfully either killing myself or being arrested. And so having an advocate that believes in you really does make a difference.
It's also very critical for our CASA volunteers to understand exactly how that trauma can be shown by our children and know how to respond appropriately and know how to advocate for their children at schools as to the proper recourses for their actions. It's really important for us to do everything we possibly can to help stabilize and sustain those educational settings and educational connections that they have.
Being moved to a different foster home means 9 times out of 10 you're going to move to a different school district. And that was a little hard for me, not really thinking I had a place in life. I started to misbehave and act out. I started to skip school. I didn't know how to read. I didn't know how to write. Didn't know how to do basic mathematics. It kind of handicapped me when it was time for me to graduate high school and try to look towards post-secondary education.
If I was to describe a fierce advocate as a CASA volunteer, I would say it was someone who has done their job, gotten their training, understand what their rights and duties are, understand what the laws say, and then be emboldened when they come into court to advocate on behalf of their child.
You ever seen Fred Claus? He ends up helping his brother, who is Santa Claus, deliver presents to all the kids at Christmas. He ended up delivering a present to every single kid, including the ones on the naughty list. And when Santa got mad at him, he said, "But you don't get it, there are no bad kids." And it really made me think, and I was like, you know what, that sounds just like my childhood, because now that I think about it, none of us were bad. We were just scared and hurt and misunderstood.